Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Miniature in the Mirror. Chapter 1, The Client in the Peacock Scarf. At 11 sharp that Tuesday morning, the bell rang like it was being rung by someone who wanted the whole city to know they had a problem worth paying for. I was in the kitchen watching Fritz coax an omelette into an edible miracle when it happened. He gave me a look that said he'd sooner surrender his whisk than answer the door, so I went. The woman who stepped in was the kind of customer you could spot before she said a word: tasteful money, controlled perfume, and the self-confidence of a person who's had more yes than no's in her life. She wore a peacock blue scarf and eyes to match. Even her heels sounded expensive. "I'm Corliss Page," she announced. "I own the Page Gallery on East 57th Street. I need Mr. Wolfe's help." "Well," I said, taking her coat, "you've come to the right Brownstone. I'm Archie Goodwin, secretary, bodyguard, and designated audience when the boss decides to speak in Latin. If you're being blackmailed, followed, or framed, you qualify for a discount." She smiled slightly, but not like she found me funny. "May I speak to Mr. Wolfe?" "Sure. If you can get him to talk back. Follow me." I led her into the office. Wolfe was in his throne behind the desk, all 300-odd pounds of him, glowering at the intrusion like a monarch disturbed during meditation. The orchid clock said he had 5 minutes before his next feeding upstairs, which meant she'd better talk fast or pay for the privilege of being interrupted. "Madam," he said, without getting up, "state your difficulty." She sat gracefully, ankles crossed, the picture of a woman who'd rehearsed the move in boarding school. "A miniature painting has gone missing from my gallery. It's a late 18th century portrait, small, delicate, insured, and very valuable. Yesterday I received a note." She opened her purse and placed an envelope on his desk. "It demands $15,000 or the writer will expose me as a seller of forged works." "That is false." Wolfe took the note with 2 fingers, like it might smudge his vocabulary. "Unsigned. Typed. The D rises. An Underwood with a misaligned key." "Exactly," she said. "The writer instructs me to place the money tonight, in a hollowed-out dictionary in the gallery library. I want the blackmailer stopped, the painting recovered, and my reputation protected." I said, "Sounds like a job for Batman, but he charges more than we do." "Archie," Wolfe said mildly, less levity. "Miss Page, do you suspect anyone?" She hesitated. "5 people have access to the gallery after hours. Hal Fisk, my manager, competent, but difficult. Lila Trent, my assistant, young, earnest, easily flustered. Max Albee, our restorer, brilliant, though not immune to temptation. Ezra Drummond, a critic who spends more time in my office than his own. And Simeon Krantz, a rival dealer who would rather ruin me than buy me out." "Colorful," I said. "Anybody missing a typewriter?" "Hal Fisk keeps one in his office," she replied. "Max uses none. Ezra writes by hand and dictates. Simeon is fond of telegrams." Wolfe leaned back, fingers touching like old friends. "Madam, blackmail is seldom solitary. It begins with knowledge, matures with greed, and ends with folly. You have brought it to me between greed and folly. For that, I thank you. You'll take the case?" "Yes. My fee is not inconsiderable." She named a number before he could. Wolfe's eyes half closed in approval. Acceptable. I took her statement, names, times, everything short of blood type. She left behind the scent of soap and varnish and attention that matched her scarf. When the door closed, Wolfe sighed. A gallery, he murmured. A cesspool disguised as culture. Artists, critics, restorers, all parasites with paint. Sounds like your kind of people, I said. Where do we start? You, of course, he said. You will go to this page gallery, prod and preen and pry. I want facts. Observe hands, not words. Hands are honest even when mouths lie. Any limits? He lifted one eyebrow. You have no limits, Archie. That is both your virtue and my punishment. I grinned. Then I'll start with the staff, inspect every underwood in the building, and keep an eye on any dictionary that looks too literary for its own good. Do, Wolfe said. And Archie, try not to get arrested. I left him to his orchids and Fritz's omelette, which meant I was heading straight for East 57th Street with a notebook, a license, and the distinct feeling that a missing painting was about to become the least of anyone's problems. Chapter 2, Galleries, Grudges, and a Library with a Dictionary Problem. By 2 that afternoon I was standing on East 57th Street staring up at the Page Gallery, one of those sleek storefronts that looks like it was built to make ordinary people feel underdressed. The window held a single portrait and the kind of lighting that costs more than my rent. I straightened my tie and walked in, practicing my polite face. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and champagne ambition. A petite brunette materialized from behind a desk with the crispness of someone who's been trained to greet customers but not to trust them. Ms. Page isn't in, she said. Can I help you? You can, if you're Lila Trent, I said. Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe. I'm investigating an unfortunate situation that involves your boss and a missing piece of decoration. Her mouth opened a fraction. The miniature? That's the one. Maybe you can tell me how a painting vanishes from a room with more locks than a jail cell. Before she could answer, a man walked out of an office on my left, tall, sandy-haired, and carrying enough self-importance to choke a gallery opening. That's quite enough, he said. Hal Fisk, manager. We prefer to handle our problems internally. Sure, I said. And I prefer to sleep till noon, but sometimes life intervenes. He gave me a stare that would have frozen butter. You'll find that sarcasm doesn't impress me, Mr. Goodwin. Neither does dishonesty, I said. Let's talk about keys. Who has them to the library where the miniature was displayed? Fisk smoothed his tie. Ms. Page and I each have one. Albee, our restorer, occasionally borrows mine. That's all. Would you swear to that? Would you? Touché, I said. Mind showing me the scene of the crime? He hesitated, then motioned me toward a narrow corridor. The library was small, wood-paneled, and lined with art books arranged like soldiers. The frame that had held the miniature was still hanging, empty, surrounded by the kind of silence you could feel. On the table sat a massive Webster's dictionary, innocent as an altar boy. That's the one, Fisk said. Page thought the ransom was to go inside it. I flipped through the pages. Nothing but definitions and dust. Neat hiding place, I said. Blackmailers always did have a sense of literature. As I closed it, a reflection in the glass door caught movement, another visitor. He wore a gray suit and an expression that could cut through varnish. Ezra Drummond, he announced. Art critic. I hope you're not here to compound the embarrassment of the place. I never compound before dinner, I said. What's your connection? I appreciate fine art, he said loftily. Ms. Page occasionally seeks my opinion. Does she ever pay for it? He sniffed. Integrity isn't for sale. Then you must be broke, I said, and let him simmer. Downstairs, I found Max Albee in a room that smelled of paint thinner and quiet desperation. His hands were the kind you trust to rebuild a watch. "I restore, not steal," he said before I'd opened my mouth. "Everyone's already looked at me that way." "I'm only looking at your fingers," I said. "Any of them use a typewriter?" He shook his head. "Not since college. I work with brushes, not keys." "Know anything about that dictionary upstairs?" "It's been there for years," he said. "Nobody reads it except Lila when the crossword gets ambitious." His tone was even, but his eyes kept sliding toward a bronze figurine on the bench, about the right size to ruin a man's afternoon. I filed that away for later. Around 4, the front door chimed and in breezed Simeon Krantz, wearing confidence like aftershave. "Ah, Goodwin," he said, spotting me. "Tell Wolfe I've been trying to buy this gallery for 5 years. Corliss would rather drown than sell to me." "Tragic, really." "Depends who's drowning," I said. He chuckled. "You're sharp. If she's finally in trouble, I might get a bargain." The man had all the charm of a loan shark, but less mercy. At closing time, the staff drifted out, pretending not to look nervous. I lingered near the library with the dictionary open on the table and a thin thread of fishing line tucked inside. If our extortionist tried to grab the loot, I intended to have his fingerprints for dessert. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The only sound was the ticking of an old clock and the faint hum of the city outside. When I finally relaxed my shoulders, a shout tore through the quiet from the restoration room below. I ran down the stairs 2 at a time. Hal Fisk was sprawled on the floor, head split open like a dropped melon. The bronze figurine I'd noticed earlier lay nearby, now a murder weapon instead of an ornament. The solvent smell was strong enough to sting the eyes. Lila screamed. Ezra swore. Max stood frozen, staring at his own hands as though trying to remember what they'd done. Simeon Krantz backed toward the door, color draining like a watercolor left in the rain. I phoned the Brownstone. Wolfe hates telephones, but there are moments when you trade manners for necessity. When he picked up, I said, "Boss, cancel the omelet. You're going to have to talk to Kramer." Chapter 3, Kramer, Coffee, and a Tear in the Varnish. By the time Inspector Kramer showed up, the gallery looked less like a showroom and more like an over-decorated crime scene. His arrival was announced by the smell of his cigar before the sound of his shoes. He came in with Sergeant Pulley Stebbins trailing him, the human bulldozer in a suit that had been ironed by gravity. Kramer glared at me as if he'd been saving it up since last time. "Goodwin," he said, "why is it every time something stinks in Manhattan, you're already standing in it?" "Luck," I said. "Some people collect coins." He grunted and turned toward the body. The bronze figurine had been bagged, but the stain on the floor was doing its best to make an impression. Kramer crouched, puffing on his cigar like it was oxygen. "No forced entry. No robbery. Somebody this guy knew." "You said you found him?" "Right after the shout," I said. "He wasn't rehearsing." Pulley shot me a look that could curdle milk. "Any witnesses?" 3.5, I said. The half being Krantz, who saw more than he'll admit and less than he'll remember. Kramer straightened up, jaw tightening. "All right, nobody leaves until I'm done. Stebbins, take statements." He turned on Ms. Page, who had just arrived, pale but still managing poise that could win medals. "You're the owner. Why didn't you call us before Goodwin here started playing detective?" She clasped her hands. "Because I thought it was blackmail, not murder." "I was wrong." "Lady," Kramer said, "you were very wrong." I took the opportunity to lean against the wall, notebook out, because if I stood still too long in his vicinity, he'd find something to accuse me of. While the inspector barked questions, I studied the room. The solvent smell hadn't faded, it was the same sharp blend Max Albee used for cleaning varnish. Bottles were stacked on a side shelf, one tipped slightly, a smear on its label. A faint footprint marked the edge of the spill, a woman's size, narrow, pointed. Lila's shoes had that shape. Kramer finished his interrogation and stomped over. "What do you make of it?" "A mess," I said. "But a talented one. Whoever did this didn't panic. They wiped the handle of that figurine and left by the side exit. I checked the latch, no sign of a forced door. Means someone with a key." "Exactly." He nodded toward the typewriters being carried out by a uniform. "We'll test them all against that ransom note Wolfe sent over. If this case starts smelling like forgery and fraud, I'll have half of Fifth Avenue under oath." When he said Wolfe, his expression soured. "Tell that mountain of yours that if he tries to run this from his armchair again, I'll nail him to it." I smiled. "I'll pass it on. He'll frame it." Kramer growled something that probably wasn't printable and stomped off toward the library. Pulley stayed behind to collect fingerprints and dirty looks. When the circus cleared out, I called the Brownstone again. Wolfe answered after 3 rings, which for him counts as athletic exertion. "Well," he said. "Fisk's skull met Art in an unfriendly way," I told him. "No forced entry, nothing stolen except maybe patience. Kramer's got the typewriters, the staff's hysterical, and Ms. Page is performing composure like she's auditioning for it." "Pfui," Wolfe muttered. "A gallery. Vanity on display, greed framed and titled. Who benefits? Take your pick." Fisk was everyone's favorite irritation. He might have been the blackmailer, or he might have found out who was. "Archie," Wolfe said, "I require facts, not suppositions. Was there adhesive on the latch?" I blinked. "You're psychic now?" "No." "Predictive. Describe the strike plate." "Fine. There was residue, sticky, faint. The lab will probably find fingerprints shaped like regret." He grunted. "Then it was tampered with. A makeshift trap to slow the door's catch. Someone expected to return quickly. Whoever it was returned with a bronze blunt instrument. I will need details of each person's temperament," he said. "Observe behavior, tone, hands. Fisk's death will ripple. The killer will step differently tomorrow." "You mean I'm going back?" He yawned, which for Wolfe is the same as yes. "And Archie, avoid epigrams. The police have delicate ears." "Sure," I said. "I'll whisper in prose." Before hanging up, I caught sight of Corliss Page standing alone near the gallery's front window, watching the flashing red lights outside. Her reflection looked calm, but her hands were trembling, just slightly, like a woman holding in too many secrets. I'd seen that look before. It always meant the same thing, the story had just changed genres. Chapter 4, Tales, Telephones, and an Ill-Tempered Receipt. Kramer's boys sealed the gallery, and by the time I stepped out into the street, the sky had turned the color of nickel. New York was sweating through its early evening routine, taxis honking, heels clicking, and newsboys shouting about scandals that were already outdated. I decided the first stop on my list should be Ezra Drummond. Critics are like cats, they hate to be ignored and can't resist curiosity. His column gave him enough ego to light Times Square, and I figured he'd already written 3 paragraphs about the tragedy by now. I found him in the bar at the Brevoort, half a glass ahead of sober and polishing his self-importance. He gave me the kind of smile you practice in mirrors. "Ah, the detective," he said. "Do you want a quote or a confession?" "I'll settle for honesty," I said. "Though I know it's not on the menu here." He laughed thinly. Hal Fisk was an obstacle to culture. Brutal taste, no finesse. Still, bludgeoning seems excessive, even for him. "You were close to Ms. Page?" I asked. "Professionally. Admiration only." "Admiration with or without quotation marks?" He looked offended. "I'm not a gossip, Mr. Goodwin. Then you're in the wrong profession, I said, finishing his drink for him. Leaving him to sulk, I tailed Lila Trent next. She'd left the gallery an hour after the cops did, heading east with her purse hugged tight and nerves in her shoulders. She walked fast, like someone running from a thought. I followed her down Lexington, past a florist and a row of cheap diners, until she ducked into a building with peeling paint and a sign that said rooms by week. Her name wasn't on the mailbox, but the manager knew it. Quiet girl, he said. Pays late, apologizes early. I waited across the street until her window went dark, then called Wolfe from a payphone. She lives modestly, I said. No sign she's cashing ransom checks. Did she appear frightened? He asked. She looked like a girl trying to keep her head above rent. Noted, Wolfe said. And Miss Page? Still queen of calm. She's too controlled. Either she's innocent or she's rehearsed. That's what you're for, he said. Discern rehearsal from reality. Right. Anything else? Yes. Stop talking and listen. Visit the insurance man tomorrow. Mr. Whitcomb. His dinner alibi with Miss Page requires confirmation. Also, procure a sample of the gallery's adhesives. You want me sniffing glue now? I prefer evidence, he said and hung up. The next morning, the city greeted me with drizzle and indifference. Whitcomb's office sat high above Madison Avenue, the kind of place where rugs outnumber people. The man himself looked polished enough to be his own advertisement. Yes, Ms. Page dined with me, he said when I brought up her alibi. We met at the Chatham Club. Discussed insurance policy adjustments. She appeared composed, though distracted. What time did you part ways? A little after 9. I drove her home. Straight home? He frowned. Of course. Why? Because I like knowing whether my clients teleport, I said. Thanks, Mr. Whitcomb. Back on the sidewalk, I stopped for coffee at a corner diner. While the waitress filled my cup, I jotted notes. Fisk's death at approximately 9:30. Page supposedly home by then. No direct witness except the insurance man. A perfect alibi, unless it wasn't. My next stop was Max Alby's studio, a cave full of half-cleaned portraits and the smell of linseed oil. He didn't look surprised to see me. You again, he said. I like your company, I said. Tell me, do restorers often buy new knives the day a man's head gets bashed in? He turned sharply. You went through my tools. I'm curious, I said. The new blade still had a price tag. Funny timing. He sighed. My old one snapped yesterday morning. I replaced it. That's all. Sure, I said. And what about this receipt for adhesive? I held up the slip I'd found in his wastebasket, retrieved earlier with the help of a friendly janitor. It's for strengthening cracked wood panels, he said evenly. Common stuff. Not the kind Wolfe likes, I muttered. He says it's for amateurs. Then he should stick to his orchids, Max said coldly. I grinned. Touchy, aren't we? Before he could answer, a phone rang on his workbench. He ignored it until the fourth ring, then picked up. No, not now, he snapped, and hung up. I caught the tail end of a soft female voice on the line. When I stepped out, I wrote down the number from the phone label and made a mental note to check it. By afternoon, I was back at the Brownstone, dictating my notes while Wolfe absorbed calories disguised as beer. When I finished, he rubbed his nose thoughtfully. The adhesive is significant, he said. If it was used on the library door, it was to make the latch resist opening for an instant. That's not sabotage, it's planning. Someone expected to re-enter undetected. And the phone call? I asked. Probably to arrange silence, he said. Or regret. I said, so far we have, one dead manager, one forged miniature, one jittery assistant, one defensive restorer, one critic with ego trouble, one rival with bad manners, and one owner who might be the calmest liar on record. Wolfe opened his eyes, heavy with patience. "You're forgetting something." "What?" "The truth," he said. "It's there, somewhere under the varnish. Peel it carefully, Archie. Don't scratch the paint." He rang for Fritz. "And bring the duck," he added. "This conversation has given me an appetite." I put away my notebook. "Duck for you, coffee for me, and murder for dessert. We make quite a menu." He didn't reply. He never does when he's thinking. And judging from the way his eyes went half-closed, the case had just taken residence in that vast attic he calls a mind. Chapter 5, Red Herrings on a White Wall. Morning came wearing a hangover. Manhattan was wrapped in fog thick enough to dull the taxis and swallow ambition. I left the Brownstone before Wolfe's breakfast ceremony began because once he started on Saucisse de Toulouse, conversation was suspended until the last crumb vanished. The Page Gallery sat behind a police seal that looked temporary enough to be disrespected. Kramer's men had finished their sweep, leaving dust where curiosity had been. Lila Trent was already inside, rearranging papers like a nervous metronome. "You shouldn't be here," I said. She jumped. "They said the gallery could reopen in 2 days." I thought, maybe if I worked, I wouldn't think about your boss getting remodeled with a bronze statue? She winced. "Please don't." "Fine," I said. "Then let's think about typewriters." Kramer's lab found nothing with the same sassy little "e" as the blackmail note. That means it came from outside? Or inside, but portable. She bit her lip. Hal had a small one at home. He typed all his reports there. He said office noise distracted him. That was a lead. I thanked her and left before sympathy turned into paperwork. Hal Fisk's apartment was on West 63rd, in a building that smelled like old wallpaper and fried onions. The superintendent let me in after I proved I wasn't selling encyclopedias. The place was tidy, too tidy. People who plan blackmail don't vacuum after themselves. His typewriter sat on a desk near the window, Underwood portable, compact and smug. I rolled in a sheet, hit the D, and grinned. Perfect match, same high jump, same attitude. Back at the gallery, I phoned Wolfe. "Bingo," I said. "Fisk's Underwood is our chatterbox." He typed the note. "So he blackmailed Miss Page," Wolfe said, his voice syrup slow. "Interesting. Did you find the miniature?" "Still missing." "Then we are not finished. Fisk may have threatened her and then been silenced to end the threat." "Meaning she killed him?" "I have not said that," he said mildly. "But her serenity troubles me. A truly innocent woman trembles, an intelligent one rehearses trembling." "I'll rattle her cage," I said. Corliss Page was in her office, signing letters she probably didn't read. She looked up as I came in, her calm expression switching on like a light. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Have the police made progress?" "They've found fingerprints, footprints, and no patients. But I've found something better, a typewriter." Her pen paused. "Whose?" "Hal Fisk's. He typed the ransom note himself." Her eyes didn't widen. They narrowed. "Then he was the blackmailer." "Seems likely. But there's the question of why he ended up dead instead of richer." She stood, walking toward a painting hung slightly crooked. "Hal thought he was indispensable. He wasn't. He resented everyone who reminded him of that. I should have dismissed him sooner. Would have saved him a headache," I said. She turned sharply. "Do you think I killed him?" "Let's say I think you're capable of almost anything." Her mouth twitched. "I'll take that as a compliment." I left her with that, because Wolfe always says you don't get answers by arguing, you get them by leaving someone alone with their conscience. My next visit was to Simeon Krantz, who operated out of a showroom that looked like an auctioneer's dream and a buyer's nightmare. He greeted me with the grin of a man allergic to sincerity. "Goodwin. How's the art of deduction?" "Still solvent," I said. "You ever try buying honesty wholesale?" "Out of stock," he said cheerfully. "Any news on the murder?" "Only that it's popular." "Tell me, where were you when Fisk was redecorated?" He shrugged. "At the Ritz, whining a client. Half the staff can confirm." "You suspect me?" "I suspect everyone," I said. "It's democratic." He laughed. "Then suspect this: Fisk came to me last week, offering to sell information about the gallery. I told him I wasn't in the blackmail business. He left angry." That sounded rehearsed but useful. I filed it away and headed for the street. By evening, I was back at the Brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, reading the Gazette as if it had personally insulted him. "Report," he said. Fisk typed the note himself. "Paige is playing poker with her emotions. Krantz claims Fisk tried to sell him secrets. And the miniature's still in the wind." He folded the paper. "Then the chain tightens. The blackmailer dies, the object of blackmail remains, and the motive adjusts itself." "Meaning?" "Someone else feared exposure," he said. "Fisk's death silenced two problems, the theft and the threat." I said, "That still leaves Max Albee, who's been handling glue like it's perfume, and Lila Trent, who's hiding behind innocence and overdue rent." "Both are capable of error, not murder," Wolfe said. "Miss Paige, however, is capable of strategy." "Did she mention insurance today?" "No." "Then she will tomorrow." He closed his eyes, fingers steepled. "Archie, tomorrow you will spread a rumor. Tell Miss Trent that the insurance examiner discovered the miniature is a forgery. Watch who sweats first." "You want me to bait the killer?" "Exactly," he said. "Bring me their pulse on a platter." I grinned. "And if they bite?" "Then I will feed Kramer his cigar," Wolfe murmured. "And Justice its dinner." Chapter 6, The Orchid Hour and a Knife That Lied. The next morning began with a racket, not from outside, but from the kitchen. Fritz was scolding a frying pan for being overzealous, and Wolfe was upstairs worshipping his orchids, that being his version of morning prayer. I had time to read the headlines, which were polite enough not to mention my name. When Wolfe finally lumbered down at 11, the orchids had been blessed, the eggs had been consumed, and civilization could resume. "Archie," he said, lowering himself into his chair with the precision of a cargo crane, "what did our rumor accomplish?" I tossed my hat onto the rack. "Plenty." Lila Trent heard the story about the forgery and nearly turned transparent. Max Albee turned a shade paler than varnish. Corliss Page pretended amusement, but her eyes did long division. And Simeon Krantz laughed like a man who knows he's next. Wolfe grunted. "Which means at least 3 of them are unsettled and 1 is foolish." "Good. The guilty mind reveals itself through posture." "Posture's fine," I said, "but Kramer's got better things. He's matching Fisk's Underwood to the ransom note as we speak." "That will confirm the obvious," Wolfe said. "The man was blackmailing Miss Page, not the other way around. The more interesting question is, who killed the blackmailer and why?" I said, "Because he was loud, greedy, and had the tact of a horn." "Insufficient," Wolfe said. "That description applies to half of humanity." He reached for his beer. "Return to the gallery this afternoon. Examine the restoration room again. I want to know what Fisk discovered about that miniature, and what frightened him enough to write that note." "Right," I said. "And if I find a murderer while I'm there?" "Don't be crude. Merely observe. Leave the pouncing to me." At 2 o'clock I was back among the smell of paint and polish. The police tape was gone, replaced by polite caution. Max Albee was at his workbench, sleeves rolled, face blank as fresh plaster. "I didn't expect you," he said. "That's because you underestimate my curiosity," I told him. "Tell me something, what happens when a painting's authenticity is questioned?" He looked up. "Depends on who's questioning. If it's a critic, we laugh. If it's an insurer, we panic. Or if it's your late manager." His jaw tensed. Hal Fisk didn't know enough about art to doubt it. Then why did he die knowing too much? He dropped his brush. "I restore canvases, not consciences. Ask Ms. Page." "I already did," I said. "She prefers silence." Max's eyes went tight. "Then maybe she has something worth keeping silent about." I left him before his temper finished thawing. Upstairs, Lila was rearranging invoices with the kind of devotion usually reserved for religion. She jumped when I appeared. "You can stop sorting," I said. "You already sorted them yesterday." "I thought it might help," she murmured. "It won't. Tell me about the miniature. When was it last seen before it went missing?" "Monday morning," she said. "I polished the glass case myself. That evening, it was gone." "Anyone else in the library?" "Hal," she said softly. "He said Ms. Page wanted it moved to the safe. Later he told me to forget he'd said that." "Did he seem scared?" She hesitated. "More, excited. Like he'd found leverage." "Leverage against who?" She swallowed. "He didn't say. But he told me once that everyone in this place was living on lies." That sounded like Fisk, loudmouth with delusions of depth. But something about Lila's tone suggested she wasn't quoting gossip, she was remembering a warning. By dusk, I was back at the Brownstone. Wolfe was reading about orchids that bloom once every decade, the kind of literature he calls refreshing. I gave him my report. He listened, eyes half closed, and when I finished, he said, "Fisk's curiosity killed him. He discovered something about that miniature, perhaps its true origin, perhaps a forgery." "Then why steal it?" "To prove it," Wolfe said. "But he made a fatal error. He confided his knowledge to the one person who couldn't afford the truth." "Corliss Page," I said. "Exactly. And when she learned he intended to extort her, she arranged to silence him." "That's theory," I said. "We still need a fact." He opened his drawer and pulled out a small tin. "This adhesive sample you retrieved from the door latch, observe." He unscrewed the lid, sniffed, and grimaced. "Inferior composition. A mixture of phenolic resin and cheap solvent. The sort used in mounting backings on miniature portraits, not in frame repair. Miss Page would not know that, Mr. Albee would." "So Albee planted it?" "Possibly," Wolfe said. "But not as sabotage. As a message." He leaned back, steepling fingers. "Archie, find out where that adhesive was purchased. And if Mr. Albee paid in cash. Where do I start?" "The hardware shop nearest the gallery. Artisans are creatures of habit." It took 2 hours and one irritated clerk before I found the trail. A purchase for the exact brand, dated the day before the murder, paid for in cash. The description on the receipt matched Max Albee's tall frame and habit of talking with his hands. I pocketed the copy and headed out. By the time I reached my car, someone was waiting. A sedan idled across the street, its engine humming like suspicion. When I crossed toward it, the headlights snapped on, and it rolled slowly away. I took the number, 2 digits smudged by dirt, but the rest legible. Back home, Wolfe took the receipt, sniffed it, and nodded once. "Albee," he said softly. "He did not kill for greed. He killed for art." "Art?" I said. "That's a new motive." "Not if the forgery was his creation," Wolfe said. "If Fisk discovered it and threatened exposure, Albee's career would dissolve. Miss Page's reputation would burn with it. They share a secret, perhaps even complicity. Or maybe she let him take the blame, I said. That, Wolfe murmured, would be consistent with her nature. He pressed the bell for Fritz. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. Tell him we shall require his presence tomorrow at 6. And tell him to bring Miss Page, Miss Trent, Mr. Albee, Mr. Krantz, Mr. Drummond, and the insurance man, Mr. Whitcomb. For what? For the end, Wolfe said. The orchid hour may be tranquil, but the truth is not. Chapter 7, False Floors and a Girl Who Blinked. By the next morning, Wolfe's mood had ripened to the color of black coffee. He'd been silent through breakfast, which, in his case, is a sign the brain is boiling behind the forehead. The orchids had been watered, the mail ignored, and Fritz dismissed with a wave that would have offended a king. At 10 o'clock, Wolfe looked up from his chair and said, Archie, bring Miss Trent. She is about to remember something important. That sounded confident, even for him. You think she's hiding a confession? He tilted his head. No. She's hiding an emotion, which is worse. Emotions are facts in disguise. I called the gallery. Lila agreed to meet me at a diner near Lexington and 59th, a place where the napkins were honest but the coffee wasn't. She looked pale when she arrived, bundled in a coat that had seen better paychecks. Miss Trent, I said, this seat's reserved for confessions and breakfast specials. She tried to smile. I don't have much to confess. Then talk about Fisk. He typed the ransom note, yes. She nodded. I didn't know until the police said so. Did you ever see the miniature outside the gallery? No, she said quickly. Never. Careful, I said. That sounded rehearsed. Her eyes darted to the window. Max told me to stay out of it, she whispered. He said the less I knew, the safer I'd be. That got my attention. Safe from what? From losing my job. From everything. Max said that? She nodded. The day before the murder. He was nervous. Said Hal had found something dangerous. Something about the painting? She stared at her coffee. He said Hal had proof the miniature wasn't from the 18th century. That it was made here, in New York, 10 years ago. So a forgery. She nodded faintly. Max said he only restored it, that Corliss bought it in good faith. But Hal said she knew. He wanted money to keep quiet. I whistled softly. That'll get a man killed faster than bad whiskey. Lila's voice dropped to a thread. You think Max did it? I think he's a man who fixes things, I said. Sometimes too permanently. By noon, I was standing in Max Albee's studio again. He didn't look surprised. Goodwin, he said. You don't tire easily. Not when the puzzle's half solved, I told him. You bought that adhesive to mount a forgery, not to fix a frame. His jaw set. Watch what you say. Why? The truth allergic? He took a slow breath. I did the restoration, yes. The painting came to us already suspicious. I touched up the varnish, corrected the signature, but the pigment was wrong, too modern. I told Corliss. She said to keep quiet until she verified provenance. Which she didn't, I said. She did, he replied bitterly. With her checkbook. Hal found out. He said he'd expose us both. He wanted 15 grand. Did you pay him? No. I told Corliss to. She said she'd handle it. And she did, I said. He looked away. You think she killed him? I think one of you did. And she's calm enough to let you take the blame. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Then I hope Wolfe's as good as you say. Because I'm tired of keeping her secrets. When I got back to the Brownstone, Wolfe was in mid-lunch, lamb chops, polenta, and the silence of a man chewing on logic. I gave him Lila's confession and Max's half-admission. He listened without blinking. Miss Page bought a forgery, knew it, and relied on her restorer to make it plausible. When Fisk discovered the truth, she staged the theft to disguise her fear. Logical, if sordid. Which leaves one question, I said. Who swung the bronze? Miss Page, Wolfe said promptly. But we shall let her deny it before witnesses. Kramer will want proof, not eloquence. Then tomorrow's gathering is still on? He nodded. 6 o'clock. Bring everyone. Miss Page will think it's a courtesy. It will be her undoing. You've already got the ending written, huh? I have the premise, he said. The ending requires an audience. That evening, as I was closing the office windows, the phone rang. A voice came on, quiet, feminine, brittle. Mr. Goodwin? Speaking. This is Corliss Page. I'd appreciate it if you stopped spreading gossip about my gallery. I'd appreciate it if your employees stopped dying. Her tone sharpened. You're overstepping. Maybe. But tomorrow at 6, you'll want to be on time. Wolfe doesn't like tardiness. A pause, long enough for calculation. Why? He has an announcement. Her breath caught just slightly. About what? You, I said, and hung up. After that, I poured myself a coffee strong enough to insult a priest. Wolfe was at his desk, dictating letters to no one in particular. You just baited a killer, he said without looking up. Yeah. You told me to. He smiled faintly. Indeed. You execute instructions tolerably well when you're not making jokes. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, I told him. He reached for another beer. Enjoy it. Compliments are rationed. The house settled into its late evening hum, Fritz cleaning up, orchids breathing upstairs, and Wolfe staring at the ceiling as if the plaster would spell out the solution. I'd seen him like that before, still as a statue, but thinking in colors you couldn't name. I knew one thing for sure, tomorrow's meeting wasn't going to end with polite applause. Chapter 8, The Room, The Reckoning, and the D that smirked. At 6 on the dot, the brownstone smelled like beer, orchids, and justice. Fritz had cleared the office of everything but a tray of sandwiches, Wolfe's idea of generosity. Chairs were arranged with the precision of a chessboard, and Wolfe sat behind his desk, arms folded, looking like a judge who had written the law himself. By 6:15, everyone had arrived, Corliss Page in steel gray silk and defiance, Lila Trent, pale as guilt, Max Albee, tense enough to hum, Ezra Drummond, smug in a tie that screamed for punishment, Simeon Krantz, smirking, Mr. Whitcomb, polished and sweating, and finally, Inspector Kramer with his cigar burning like an opinion. Wolfe didn't stand. He never does. He simply said, "You all know why you are here." The truth is a boorish guest, but it insists on attending. Kramer grunted. "Get to it, Wolfe. My patience has a curfew." "You'll have your culprit before it expires," Wolfe said calmly. "Archie, close the door." I did. The sound of the latch felt final. "Let us begin with what is known," Wolfe said, his voice smooth as dark syrup. Hal Fisk was blackmailing Miss Page. He had discovered that the miniature stolen from her gallery was a forgery, not a restoration error, but a deliberate imitation. He typed a note demanding $15,000. That note was written on his personal underwood, a fact now confirmed by Inspector Kramer's laboratory. Corliss's chin lifted a degree. "Then that clears me, doesn't it?" Wolfe looked at her mildly. "If he had lived, perhaps. But he died because someone wanted both silence and scapegoat." He leaned forward slightly, a monumental gesture for him. "Consider, Fisk is found dead in the restoration room. The murder weapon, a bronze figurine, bore no fingerprints. The latch of the door had traces of adhesive. That adhesive was purchased the day before the murder, by Mr. Albee. Max's voice cracked the stillness. I told you, I used it for work. Indeed, Wolfe said. But the formulation you bought was not one used in restoration. It was the sort employed for sealing glass mounts, precisely what would have been necessary to disguise the miniature's counterfeit backing. You are talented, Mr. Albee, but sloppy in your panic. The smear on the latch was not yours, though. You handle glue like a surgeon. Someone else applied it crudely, to fake tampering. He turned toward Corliss Page. That, madam, was your contribution. Her eyes went glacial. You're accusing me on intuition? On pattern, Wolfe replied. You engineered a theft that never happened, to conceal a fraud that did. When Fisk decided to extort you, you pretended to comply, then removed the dictionary's money bait and arranged to meet him after closing. You expected persuasion to suffice. It did not. He mocked you. You struck him. Kramer puffed his cigar like a volcano. You got proof, or is this another lecture? Proof enough, Wolfe said. The typewritten draft found in Miss Page's own trash, half a page of the blackmail note, bearing her typewriter's distinctive elevated E. Mr. Goodwin retrieved it this morning from her building's refuse room. Kramer's eyebrows hit the ceiling. You what? I shrugged. The super owed me a favor. Wolfe continued. Miss Page wrote the first draft to disguise authorship. When Fisk died, she planted the final version in his office, hoping police would assume it was self-written insurance. But the draft betrayed her. A forgery, a false theft, a premeditated murder, all layered like varnish on a bad painting. Corliss Page's voice was low, controlled. If I were guilty, why call you at all? You didn't, Wolfe said. You came to hire me because you wanted control, to guide suspicion away from yourself. You needed an intermediary to handle Kramer while you composed your version of events. Unfortunately, you underestimated both Fisk's arrogance and my intolerance for deceit. Silence settled like dust. Even the orchids upstairs might have been listening. Then Lila spoke, trembling. Ms. Page, it's true? Corliss turned toward her, lips pressed tight. For a moment, she looked less like a suspect and more like a woman watching her empire sink. Then she said quietly, he would have destroyed everything. I built that gallery from nothing. One article from Drummond, one rumor from Krantz, and I'd be finished. Fisk thought I'd pay to protect my reputation. He was right, just not in the way he imagined. Kramer motioned to Pulley Stebbins, who had been waiting by the hall. The cuffs clicked like punctuation. I'll take it from here, Kramer said. His tone was half irritation, half reluctant respect. Of course, Wolfe said, as if handing over dessert. You may also inform the insurance company that the genuine miniature, the real one, not the forgery, is in Fisk's locker at the gallery. He kept it as leverage, intending to sell it back when the blackmail matured. Kramer muttered something about ulcers and left with his prisoner. The others filed out quietly, each carrying a different brand of relief. When the door closed behind the last one, the brownstone sighed back into its natural calm. I looked at Wolfe. So the great moral of the day? He closed his eyes. Vanity is the most reliable motive after greed. Miss Page forged truth as easily as she sold art. Both cracked under light. That's poetic, I said. You want me to write it down for your memoirs? He snorted. God forbid. Go fetch the beer. I did. He took a long drink, leaned back, and said, return her retainer, Archie. I don't collect fees from murderers. Sure, I said. But keep the part for inconvenience? Archie. Fine, I said, handing him the envelope. You always ruin a perfectly good joke with ethics. He gave me a look that meant the conversation was over. Outside, Manhattan buzzed like it hadn't noticed a thing, art still selling, lies still painted. And in the Brownstone, Nero Wolfe reached for another beer, because even genius needs carbonation after justice.